I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to write something like this, but I guess everyone thinks that, right up until their life quietly falls apart on a random Tuesday night. I'm Ethan, I'm 24, and until a few months ago, I was convinced I had things figured out. Not in some flashy, big city way. Just steady, predictable, safe. I lived in a small Midwestern town where nothing ever really changes, where people wave at red lights and news travels faster than the mail. Lily and I had been together for almost 3 years. We talked about moving someday, maybe getting out, maybe not. It all felt close enough to real to stop questioning it. The night everything broke didn't come with yelling or slammed doors. It came with silence, and Lily's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. I didn't need to. The screen lit up on its own, right next to my elbow, like it wanted to be seen. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? No name. Just a heart emoji. I stared at it longer than I want to admit, trying to invent a harmless explanation. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a coworker being weird. Maybe I was overreacting. That's what trust does. It gives lies a place to hide. Then another message came in. He doesn't suspect anything, right? I remember feeling strangely calm. Not sad. Not angry. Just hollow. Like someone had reached inside me and turned off a switch. When Lily walked back into the kitchen, towel in her hair, humming like it was any other night, she saw my face and stopped. She didn't even ask what was wrong. She followed my eyes straight to the phone. That pause told me everything. At first, she denied it. Of course she did. Then she minimized it. Then she cried. Then she told me it just happened and didn't mean anything. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just listened, nodded, and felt something inside me harden. By midnight, she was packing a bag. By morning, she was gone. The days after were worse than the discovery itself. In a small town, you don't disappear, you echo. I'd see her car parked outside places she used to avoid. I'd hear half-stories from mutual friends. People suddenly acted careful around me, like grief was contagious. I stopped going out. I stopped answering texts. I went to work, came home, sat in the dark, and replayed every moment of the last 3 years, looking for signs I missed. The worst part wasn't losing Lily. It was realizing how replaceable I'd been. About 2 weeks later, I started going to a small cafe on the edge of town. Not because the coffee was good, it wasn't, but because no one I knew ever went there. It was quiet, anonymous. That's where I first saw Claire. She was sitting alone by the window, laptop open, sleeves rolled up, completely unbothered by the world around her. There was something calm about her that felt out of place in a town like this. She looked up when I walked in, held my gaze for half a second longer than polite, and then smiled. Not politely, but knowingly. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the first step toward everything changing. I kept telling myself I didn't go back to that cafe because of her. It was easier to believe I just liked the quiet, the cracked leather booths, the way the barista never tried to make small talk. But every time the door chimed and I stepped inside, my eyes moved to the window before I even realized I was doing it. Claire wasn't there every day. That somehow made it worse. On the days she always sat in the same spot, laptop open, coffee untouched long after it had gone cold. She dressed simply, jeans, neutral colors, nothing that screamed for attention. Still, people noticed her. Not in the way they notice someone loud or flashy, but the way you notice a change in weather. Subtle. Inevitable. The third time our visits overlapped, she spoke first. "You always order the same thing," she said, glancing at my cup. "That's either discipline or emotional damage." I laughed before I could stop myself. It came out rusty, like I hadn't used that muscle in a while. "Probably the second one," I said. She closed her laptop, finally giving me her full attention. Up close, I could tell she was older than me, not by much, but enough. Early 30s, maybe mid. There were lines near her eyes that suggested she smiled often, and more importantly, that she'd earned them. "I'm Claire," she said, "and you look like someone who's been lied to recently." I should have deflected, made a joke, changed the subject. Instead, something in me cracked. "Is it that obvious?" She shrugged. "To people who've been there?" "Yeah." We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing heavy. She didn't pry. She didn't offer advice. She just listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally smirking in a way that made me feel seen without being judged. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. "If you're here tomorrow," she said, "I probably will be too." She was gone before I could respond. That night, Lily texted me for the first time since she'd left. I miss you. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. 2 weeks ago, I would have responded instantly. Now, all I felt was exhaustion. I didn't reply. I turned my phone face down and went to sleep. Claire was there the next day. So was I? Over the next week, our conversations stretched longer. She told me she'd moved to town a year earlier for work, that she wasn't married, didn't have kids, and wasn't planning on settling just because people expected her to. She never said what she did exactly, only that it involved fixing other people's mistakes. I liked that answer more than a job title. With her, I didn't feel rushed. She never tried to impress me or rush intimacy. There was a quiet confidence in her, the kind that comes from surviving things you don't talk about anymore. She asked smart questions. She noticed when I avoided certain topics. She didn't push. One afternoon, Lily showed up at my apartment unannounced. She cried. She apologized again. She swore it was over. She said the other guy meant nothing. The words slid off me like rain on glass. When she reached for my hand, I pulled away. I don't think you miss me, I said. I think you miss who I was when I didn't know. She left angry this time. That evening, I went to the cafe later than usual. Claire could tell something was off the second she saw me. Rough day, she said. Yeah. She studied me for a moment, then smiled slightly. Good. Those are usually the days something honest happens. I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. Something honest did happen that night, just not in the way I expected. The cafe was nearly empty. Lights dimmed low as if the place itself was winding down. Rain tapped softly against the windows, blurring the street outside into streaks of yellow and gray. Claire and I stayed long after the barista stopped pretending not to watch the clock. You don't have to talk about it, she said, stirring her coffee even though it had gone cold hours ago. But you look like someone who's tired of carrying things alone. That was all it took. I told her everything. Not just about Lily cheating, but about the small humiliations I hadn't noticed until it was over. The canceled plans. The way she'd started guarding her phone. How she'd make me feel guilty for asking simple questions. I admitted how stupid I felt for missing the signs. Claire didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped talking, my throat tight and my hands clenched, she leaned back and let out a slow breath. You weren't stupid, she said calmly. You were trusting. There's a difference. I looked at her, surprised by how much that simple distinction mattered. She told me about her own past, not details, not names, but enough to paint the shape of it. A long relationship. A betrayal that didn't explode, just quietly poisoned everything. A year spent rebuilding herself instead of jumping into the next thing. I learned something important, she said. When someone betrays you, they don't just break trust. They try to rewrite reality, make you doubt your own instincts. That hit harder than I expected. We walked out together when the cafe closed. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the air cool and clean. For a moment, neither of us moved. Do you want to take a walk? She asked. We strolled through quiet streets, past dark houses and closed storefronts. It felt strangely intimate without being romantic. No touching, no tension, just two people occupying the same silence. At one point, she stopped and turned to face me. You're angry, she said. You just don't know what to do with it yet. I don't want revenge, I said quickly. She smiled, not unkindly. I didn't say you did. There was something in her tone that made me think she understood that feeling better than I did. The next few days, Lily's presence in my life became louder. She started showing up places she knew I'd be, posting things online that felt aimed directly at me. Inside jokes, photos meant to provoke jealousy. Mutual friends started asking questions again. She says you're being cold, one of them told me. That she made a mistake. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent more time with Claire. We started meeting outside the cafe, long walks, quiet dinners, conversations that stretched late into the night. She never crossed a line, never tried to replace what I'd lost. She was just there, steady, observant. One evening, over takeout at her place, I finally asked the question that had been circling in my head. Why are you spending time with me? She considered that for a moment. Because you're honest, she said, and because you're at a turning point. People either grow there, or they repeat the same story with different characters. And which one do you think I am? That depends, she said, meeting my eyes, on whether you're willing to stop seeing yourself as the victim. That was the moment something shifted. Not desire, not romance, power. For the first time since Lily betrayed me, I didn't feel like I was reacting anymore. I felt like I was choosing. Once you start choosing, it's hard to go back to reacting. Claire didn't say or do anything dramatic after that night. No big speeches. No sudden intimacy. If anything, she pulled back just enough to make me aware of my own intentions. She let me reach out first. Let me suggest plans. Let me define what this was becoming. And that was new for me. With Lily, everything had always felt slightly tilted, like I was the one compensating, adjusting, proving. With Claire, there was balance. She noticed effort and returned it. She respected boundaries without turning them into walls. One evening, we cooked dinner together at my place. Nothing fancy. Pasta, cheap wine, music playing quietly in the background. At one point, I caught myself laughing, really laughing, and it startled me. Claire noticed. That sound, she said, smiling. You haven't made it in a while. She wasn't wrong. As things between us deepened, Lily's attempts to pull me back escalated. She started messaging Claire anonymously, snide comments, veiled warnings. Claire showed me one night, her expression calm but sharp. She's watching, Claire said, which means she's insecure. I felt a flash of anger. I didn't tell her about you. You didn't have to, Claire replied. People like that sense when they're losing control. That word, control, stuck with me. Lily had always framed herself as the one who was hurt, the one who was misunderstood. Seeing her spiral now, watching her rewrite the narrative online, I realized something uncomfortable. She didn't regret cheating. She regretted losing leverage. One night, after too much scrolling and not enough sleep, I said something I hadn't planned to say. I want her to feel it, I admitted. Not pain, just awareness. Claire didn't flinch. Then you need to be precise, she said. Revenge that's loud is sloppy. The kind that lasts is quiet. She didn't suggest anything. She didn't push. She simply asked questions. What mattered to Lily? How did she see herself? What scared her the most? As I answered, a pattern emerged. Lily cared about perception, about being admired, about never being the villain in her own story. Claire leaned back, thoughtful. Then that's where the truth belongs. From that moment on, nothing felt rushed, but nothing felt accidental either. We didn't act immediately. Weeks passed. Life continued. Claire and I grew closer in small ways, shared routines, late-night talks, a slow, undeniable attraction that stayed just beneath the surface. And then Lily made a mistake. She posted a long, emotional story online about betrayal, mine, according to her. She painted herself as loyal, abandoned, blindsided. People responded with sympathy, support, validation. Claire read it once, then closed her phone. She just set the stage, she said. I felt my pulse quicken. For what? For the truth, Claire replied. But only if you're ready to tell it. I realized then that this wasn't about humiliating Lily. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. I didn't respond to Lily's post. That was the first move, silence. In a town this small, silence speaks louder than any comment ever could. People noticed. They started asking questions, not to me directly, but to each other. I could feel the shift in the air, the way curiosity slowly replaced sympathy. Claire watched it unfold like a chessboard. Let them lean forward, she said. If you rush, you look defensive. Living with that restraint was harder than I expected. Every instinct in me wanted to correct the record immediately, to prove I wasn't the monster she described. Claire kept me grounded, reminding me that truth doesn't need urgency, it needs timing. Meanwhile, Lily tried new tactics. She messaged my sister. She showed up at a friend's party I hadn't planned to attend, but did. She laughed too loudly, touched my arm too casually, made sure Claire saw her. Claire didn't react. That unnerved Lily more than anger ever could. The first real crack appeared when someone commented on Lily's post asking about the other guy. Just one line. Neutral. Curious. Lily deleted it within minutes. Claire smiled when she saw that. People don't delete what they're proud of, she said. That night, something shifted between Claire and me. We were sitting close on her couch, the space between us smaller than usual. The attraction we'd been avoiding finally surfaced. Not explosive, not reckless, but deliberate. When she kissed me, it wasn't rushed. It was grounding. Afterward, she rested her forehead against mine. This, she said softly, doesn't work if it's about her. I know, I replied. And I meant it. What we were building felt real in a way Lily and I never had. Claire didn't need to be chosen. She assumed I would choose well, or not at all. A few days later, Lily reached out again. Why are you letting people think I cheated? That message made me laugh. Out loud. I showed Claire. She's panicking, Claire said. Now comes the question, do you want closure or clarity? What's the difference? Closure is private, she said. Clarity is public. I asked her what she would do. She shook her head. This isn't my story to tell. That was when I understood. Claire wasn't directing me. She was sharpening me. I drafted a post. Deleted it. Drafted another. Deleted that too. It wasn't until I stopped writing defensively that the words finally settled. I didn't accuse. I didn't insult. I didn't dramatize. I told the timeline. Dates. Facts. Screenshots. Just enough to establish credibility. Not enough to feel vindictive. I ended with a single line. I didn't leave because I stopped loving her. I left because I found out I wasn't the only one she was choosing. I didn't tag Lily. I posted it at midnight. By morning, the town was awake, and Lily's carefully constructed version of events was already starting to collapse. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Messages. Missed calls. Notifications stacked on top of each other like a digital landslide. For a brief moment, panic flared. Then I remembered. I'd told the truth. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't have to lie to keep up. Claire was already awake when I got to her place. She handed me coffee without a word and nodded toward my phone. You don't have to read everything, she said. Just the parts that matter. The parts that mattered were clear enough. People weren't angry. They were disappointed. That was worse for Lily. Comments started appearing under my post. Not attacks. Questions. People connecting dots they'd ignored before. Someone mentioned seeing Lily with another guy weeks earlier. Someone else confirmed timelines. Lily tried to respond once. It was emotional, defensive, long. She deleted it within an hour. By afternoon, she texted me directly. You didn't have to do this. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I didn't do anything. I just stopped covering for you. That was the last message I sent her. Claire and I went for a drive that evening, no destination in mind. The town looked different now, not smaller, but clearer, as if a fog I didn't know I was living in had lifted. Do you feel better? Claire asked. I feel lighter, I said, but also kind of sad. She nodded. That's normal. You're grieving the version of her you thought existed. A week passed. Lily's social circle shrank quietly. Invitations dried up. People stopped defending her online. No public shaming. No dramatic fallout. Just absence. Then Lily made her final move. She showed up at Claire's door. I wasn't there. Claire told me later, calmly, like she was recounting the weather. She wanted to talk, Claire said, to warn me about you. My jaw tightened. What did she say? That you're manipulative. That you twist stories. That you're using me. And Claire smiled faintly. I asked her why she was standing on my porch instead of trusting the truth she claimed to live by. Lily left shortly after. That night, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't come from action. It came from consistency, from refusing to engage in the chaos she needed to survive. Claire and I talked long into the night. About boundaries. About what came next. About not repeating old patterns. You didn't win, Claire said gently. You grew. I looked at her then, not as someone who had helped me, but as someone I chose to stand beside. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something I needed to brace for. It felt like something I was finally ready to meet. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly Lily disappeared from my life. It was how much space she'd been taking up without me realizing it. Once the noise died down, there was quiet. Real quiet. The kind that forces you to confront yourself instead of reacting to someone else's chaos. For a while, that silence felt uncomfortable. Then it started to feel earned. Claire and I didn't rush to label what we were. There was no dramatic, what are we conversation. We just kept showing up for each other. Mornings turned into routines. Routines turned into familiarity. Familiarity turned into something steady and grounding. Still, I'd be lying if I said Lily was completely gone. She started working nearby. Coincidentally, she claimed. I'd see her sometimes, across the street or through a store window. Our eyes met once. She looked away first. That bothers her more than anything you could say, Claire told me later. I asked Claire if she ever felt like this whole thing had pulled her into unnecessary drama. She shook her head. You didn't bring drama. You brought honesty. Big difference. One night, we talked about age. About the gap between us. Does it ever feel weird? I asked. She smiled slightly. Only when people assume experience means control. It doesn't. It means perspective. That perspective mattered. Claire never positioned herself above me. She didn't rescue me. She just refused to let me lie to myself. A few days later, I ran into Lily unexpectedly at the grocery store. No audience. No performance. Just us. She looked tired. "You happy now?" she asked. I thought about it. About the past few months. About the anger I'd carried. About how it had finally loosened its grip. "I'm honest now," I said. "That's better than happy." She didn't respond. Just nodded and walked away. When I told Claire, she didn't celebrate. She didn't analyze. "Then it's done," she said simply. That was when I understood the real revenge. Not humiliation, not exposure, not loss of status. It was irrelevance. Claire and I sat on her porch that evening, watching the sun sink behind the houses. She rested her head on my shoulder, light and unassuming. "You know," she said, "most people never realize they have a choice." I looked at her and smiled. I did, and I was done looking back. With Lily finally out of my orbit, I expected things to feel complete, wrapped up. Instead, something else surfaced, something quieter and harder to name. Responsibility. Not for her. For myself. Claire noticed it before I did. She always did. "You're not restless," she said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. "You're recalibrating." I leaned against the counter, watching her move with that effortless confidence I'd come to admire. "Is that what this feeling is?" "It's what happens when survival mode shuts off," she replied. "Your nervous system doesn't know what to do with peace yet." That made uncomfortable sense. Without Lily's chaos, there was no villain to push against. No wrong to correct. Just me. And the question of who I was becoming now that I wasn't defined by betrayal. The town, predictably, moved on. New gossip. New scandals. Lily became a background character in conversations that once revolved around her. When her name came up, it was brief. Neutral. Finished. Claire and I kept things deliberately slow. We spent more time talking about values than feelings. About expectations. About what we wouldn't tolerate. One night, I asked her why she'd gotten involved with me at all. Not the polite version. The real one. She thought about it longer than usual. "Because you listened," she said. "Most men your age are too busy defending themselves to do that." I absorbed that quietly. There was a moment, inevitable, I think, when Lily tried one last indirect move. She applied for a job connected to Claire's work. Not under her. Just close enough to be noticed. Claire declined the recommendation without comment. "No explanation?" I asked. "Professional boundaries don't require personal footnotes," she replied. That was it. No drama. No satisfaction parade. Just consequence. As weeks turned into months, I realized something important. Claire had never needed revenge. She understood outcome. One evening, sitting beside her on the couch, I finally said the thing I'd been avoiding. "I don't want to repeat old patterns." She looked at me, calm and steady. "Then don't. But understand this. Growth isn't proven by how you leave something broken. It's proven by what you build afterward." That night, when she reached for my hand, it felt intentional, equal, chosen, not a reaction, a decision. And for the first time, I trusted myself to make it. By the time spring rolled around, things in town had settled. Gossip cycles had run their course. Lily's attempts to stay relevant had faded into muted online posts and awkward encounters at mutual hangouts. No shouting. No confrontation, just quiet irrelevance, the kind that leaves a person noticing that the world no longer orbits them. Claire and I, on the other hand, were building something carefully, deliberately. Our relationship had evolved without headline moments or dramatic gestures. We moved at a pace dictated by curiosity and mutual respect. Late-night conversations had become the norm. Walks along the quiet streets, stopping only to watch the sun cast shadows across brick buildings. Shared meals that weren't just sustenance, but rituals of presence. It wasn't passion alone that bound us. It was clarity. We were learning how to communicate without expectation, to challenge without diminishing, to support without controlling. When I failed or faltered, because I still did, she met it with patience rather than judgment. And when she faltered, I mirrored the same understanding. That reciprocity was intoxicating in a way I hadn't known existed. There were still reminders of Lily. Mutual friends dropping small hints, passing mentions of her name, but they no longer carried weight. The tension she'd created evaporated slowly, replaced by our shared routines, our inside jokes, our quiet understanding. One night, sitting together in her small apartment, Claire pulled me close. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" she asked. I considered it. A few months ago, I would have told her that my life had collapsed, that I felt hollow and lost. Now, I realized how wrong that would have been. I had been lost, but only to find something better. To discover boundaries, honesty, and self-respect. "I do," I said. "More than I thought I would." Her lips curved slightly. "Good. Because the world rewards clarity, not chaos." I laughed softly. I never thought I'd take life lessons from revenge. She shook her head. "It wasn't revenge. It was truth. And now you see what really matters." That perspective stayed with me. For the first time, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else's mistakes or manipulations. I was choosing my path, constructing it from small decisions, each one deliberate and conscious. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Weeks passed, seasons shifting gradually. With each day, I grew more aware of the differences between fleeting emotion and lasting consequence, between reactive rage and intentional clarity, between the hollow victories of others' failures and the quiet satisfaction of integrity. Lily's story had ended quietly, and in her absence, I discovered the true measure of resilience, not in triumph over another person, but in the reclamation of oneself. And Claire? She was no longer just a refuge. She had become a partner, a guide, a reminder of what steady, chosen connection feels like. One that didn't need spectacle, because its strength was inherent and mutual. By the time the sun set over the small town one evening, I finally understood it. Revenge, if it has any value at all, isn't about the target. It's about who you become in the process. And with Claire by my side, I realized I had become someone I was proud to be. The final months of that year were quieter than I could have imagined. No dramatic confrontations. No lingering bitterness. The story of Lily faded into a faint hum, something I remembered but no longer dwelled on. What remained was the life I had reclaimed, the choices I had made, and the clarity I had earned. Claire and I had settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and deliberate. Mornings were slow, with coffee and conversations about everything and nothing. Evenings were filled with shared tasks and quiet laughter. Our connection wasn't defined by grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was built from consistency, trust, and understanding. It was grounding, the kind of relationship that didn't need to prove itself to anyone else. I sometimes reflected on the weeks after Lily's betrayal. The hollow emptiness I had felt at first seemed distant now, a faint shadow that reminded me how far I had come. The anger, the confusion, the restless nights, all of it had served a purpose. I had been forced to examine myself, to confront the reality of my emotions, and to discover the kind of partner I could be and the kind of love I deserved. Claire had been a revelation in that process, not because she had saved me or taken control, but because she had mirrored strength, patience, and insight back to me. She had allowed me to choose my path, to assert my own agency, and to transform betrayal into self-awareness. In every decision we made together, I felt her influence, not as domination, but as guidance. One evening, we took a walk through the quiet streets of the town, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. There was no need for conversation. The air itself felt like a reward for endurance and honesty. We stopped on a small bridge overlooking the creek that ran through town. The water moved steadily, oblivious to the drama and lives that unfolded above it. "You've changed," Claire said softly. I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "I think I finally understand what really matters." "And what is that?" she asked, though I knew she already did. "Truth. Integrity. Choosing what I want instead of reacting to what others do." She smiled, resting her head against my shoulder. "Exactly." For the first time since the betrayal, I felt complete, not in a triumphant sense, but in a way that was far deeper. The town, small and unchanged, continued around us. People moved through their lives, some oblivious to the quiet transformation happening in the shadows. It didn't matter. I didn't need validation from them anymore. I had claimed my own narrative. I thought about Lily once, briefly, about the hurt, the lies, the attempts to manipulate. But that was in the past. The lesson wasn't about revenge or making her suffer. It was about reclaiming myself and refusing to let her story overwrite mine. That was the only victory that mattered. Claire squeezed my hand gently. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." I looked at her, at the calm certainty in her eyes, and I realized that for the first time, I truly believed it. There was no fear, no doubt, only presence. Life could throw whatever it wanted at us, but I now had the tools, the clarity, and the support to navigate it without losing myself. We turned from the bridge and walked back toward the quiet streets, hand in hand. I breathed in the crisp air, felt the steady pulse of life around me, and let the past settle into its proper place. A story I had survived and grown from, not one that defined me anymore. That night, as the town went to sleep under a blanket of stars, I understood fully. Revenge had never been about her. It had been about me, about facing betrayal, reclaiming agency, and discovering the strength I didn't know I possessed. And in that understanding, I found peace. With Claire beside me, steady and unwavering, I was ready to live not as a reaction to betrayal, but as a man who had chosen his path, his love, and his future. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled without hesitation, knowing that I had finally arrived at the place I was meant to be.